Do you ever wonder whether or not you're really living life as your true, genuine self? Or do you know for sure that you are not living as your genuine self, but you're not quite sure how to change it? If either of those situations apply to you, then today's video is for you. My name is Kara McGill. I'm an ADHD coach and creator, and I am here for the busy, ambitious brains who want to get schnizzle done, but very often don't show up as themselves or know how to show up as themselves. So if that's you, stick around. Let's get into it. Today's topic actually comes from a reader question. I recently invited my viewers to ask me anything about ADHD, and this is one question I got that I couldn't wait to address. Teach Me We Kids writes, I really love your videos. I'm new here and I'm learning a lot. I'd like to know more about how to discover my true and genuine self. I love this question because it's something that I've given a lot of thought to myself in my own life. And I think we all go there because we're never quite sure if what we're showing up as is our true and genuine self. And some of this can be chalked up to just wisdom and time on this planet. The older we get, the more we come to know who we truly are. And as somebody in their mid 50s, I could definitely attest to the fact that as I've gotten older, I've become more and more aware of who I am and how I want to live my life. Now, that's not to say that age is the only way to understand your true and genuine self, because certainly there's a lot of people out there in the world who are still putting on masks late into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So with that said, I'm going to give you a few tools and prompts to help you explore this question on your own so you can find out whether or not you are living your true and genuine self. And the first question I would ask you is, how do you know you're not your true and genuine self? What is it about the way you show up in the world right now that gives you pause to question whether or not this is who you really are or not? Obviously, something is triggering this wonder, and that is a great place to start exploring. So if you were standing in front of me and I asked you that question, you might respond with, well, I just don't feel like I'm living my true and genuine self. And that is the perfect point of entry to start exploring where in your life you are not showing up as your true and genuine self. Because I don't think it's an all or nothing thing. I think in some cases we show up as our truest self when we feel safe or excited and engaged in doing something. And in some cases we don't show up as our true self. We're masking. And sometimes that can be a very appropriate response in the moment. However, if you're always putting on a mask and showing up as someone that you're not, first of all, that is extremely exhausting, which then, of course, can lead to burnout because you always have to remember to be some other version of yourself and not who you truly are. So my next question to you is to think about where in your life are you showing up as something other than who you truly are? Is it at home with your family or in your social group? Or maybe it's happening at school or work. So I'll give you an example from my own life. When I was in corporate, I was never showing up as my true self. I was always filtering myself through what I thought the company that I worked within would expect of me as a good employee, not only when I was at work, but also how I showed up in the world outside of work. So for example, if I were going to post something on social media, I always had this thought of, if somebody from work saw this, would I be a little embarrassed or apprehensive for them to see it? And it took a while for me to realize that not only was I showing up as a false self in the office, but I was letting that impact other areas of my life, from the clothes that I bought or the way I showed up on social media or how I spent my time outside of the office. And as I started to realize that, it became evidently clear to me why I felt so burnt out all the time. It wasn't that my job sucked. It wasn't that my company sucked. It's that I wasn't being who I was, and I was putting all of this cognitive energy into spinning up this version that I thought they needed me to be. So in that moment, I knew I had three choices. I could either keep the status quo going because clearly it was working and I was successful in corporate, or I could start having the courage to show up as myself and just see what happened. Or I could leave my job and start doing something else that felt more aligned to who I was. Now, at that time, I was already planning to leave my job because I was launching my coaching business. So that was the natural choice for me to take. However, in retrospect, I think I lost a good opportunity to test those assumptions that I had. I had the story in my mind that I needed to be a certain way at work that wasn't who I actually was in order to be successful. And knowing that I was going to leave my job anyways, I could have said to myself, well, I'm just going to show up as I am and see where the chips fall. And I knew it would have been just fine, but hindsight's 2020. So I share that story with you just in case you find yourself in a similar situation. Another great barometer for understanding whether or not you are showing up as your true self is your feelings. So there's this great Chinese proverb that says, tension is who you are not, relaxation is who you are. So think about that. Where in your life are you feeling a lot of tension or restriction or resistance to feeling yourself or doing what you really naturally want to do? That's a really good indication of where you're not showing up as yourself. And then from there, you want to get curious without judgment about why you're not showing up as yourself and start testing those assumptions. Because here's the truth. It is a very human thing to believe that if people knew who you really were, warts and all, they wouldn't love you. That is the human condition of not feeling worthy enough, and we all experience it. But with a little awareness, you can poke at that belief and see that is actually not the case, and it's just a story you're telling yourself. A few other tools that I want to share in terms of this exploration that I think are super helpful is 3 different assessments that I talk about a lot. And if you sign up for my email list, which I will link below, you will get access to all 3 of these. So the first one is the VIA Character Strengths Assessment. And this assessment comes from the positive psychology research that has looked across the human culture to understand the top 24 human characteristics that are strengths that all human beings have, but we have them in different orders. The top 5 being our top signature strengths. And when you know what your top signature strengths are, it's a very good indication of when you are showing up and using those strengths, you are not only being your most true and genuine self, you're also being your best self. So for example, some of my top strengths are love of learning, hope, and gratitude. Let's use those in the context of what I just shared with you about not showing up as my true self in the office. If I could go back now, knowing what I know now, I would ask myself, what am I learning about myself in this moment? I'm learning that they may not like me for who I really am. I may not be successful if I am my true self. And if that's what I was thinking, then I could pause and say, I'm first of all very grateful that I uncovered this limiting belief because it sucks. And I'm very hopeful that if I start showing up as more myself, that I will be received well and I will continue to learn based on the feedback that I get so that I can continue to be more and more myself. So that's a small way of how I could apply my signature strengths in the moment. But more broadly, it encompasses everything I do on this channel, which is me showing up as my true self. I'm always learning about the latest research in psychology and ADHD and how to live a great life when you're neurodivergent. And I'm really grateful for all the great feedback that I get. And I'm very hopeful that I get to continue doing this long into the future. The other 2 things I think are really important to get clear on are your values and needs. Knowing your needs is really powerful in terms of showing up as your true self. Because when you know what your needs are, you can work to get them met. And that puts you in a position of power. And the more powerful you feel in your own right, the more courage you have to show up as you truly are. And your values are an indication of what's most important to you. And obviously, you want to make sure that you are showing up as your true and genuine self when you are being present for the things that you value most in life. So I hope those tools are helpful in terms of figuring out whether or not you are being your true and genuine self. The other thing I want to mention here is that very often we know we're not showing up as our true and genuine self. And it takes a lot of courage to change that. Courage comes from that sense of personal power, knowing that if you can meet your own needs, then you truly have the power to show up as you are. I can think of no better illustration for this than, let's say, a teenager who realizes they're gay and they want to come out, they want to be their true selves, but they know that if they did so, let's say it would conflict with their family values. And if they were honest about who they were, they would get ostracized from their family. And I can imagine in a scenario like that, that you might want to keep the mask on and not reveal your true self until you can meet your own needs and be in your personal powers so that you can show up as you truly are. And I share that because sometimes in life, we can't share who we truly are or what we're truly feeling or thinking because it's either not safe or the consequences wouldn't be worth it. And in those moments, I think it's just really important to remind yourself that you know in your heart who you truly are. And there's a very good reason why you don't want to reveal yourself. And there shouldn't be any shame around that. It's just sometimes life puts us in those positions. But in the long run, as long as you know who you genuinely are, you can continue to make choices that align with your true self. Because there is no one on this earth who will ever know you as you know yourself. So that is why it's really important to be able to trust yourself enough to make the right decisions for you. And that leads me to the video that I will be sharing next week about why I chose not to have children as an ADHDer. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.